If I could get everybody's attention, we'd like to call the meeting to order at 7 o'clock. And we'd like to start the meeting with a pledge of allegiance to the flag. Everybody I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Kind of a low heart there, guys.
I think tonight, since there are so many of us from all of the various boards that are involved with the village, we should maybe take a run around and if everybody introduce themselves. We could start with our mayor.
Bruce Stebbins from the mayor of the village board.
I'm Ruth Seeking, the village board.
Mike Shepherd, village trustee.
Megan O'Donnell, also trustee.
Trustee Eric Reinagel.
Nate Collins, trustee.
And we'll jump down to you.
Charlie Brewer with the applicant.
Brody Smith, Bonchinick and King.
Gordon Stansberry, GTS Consulting, traffic engineer.
Steve Breitska, landscape architect at ADR.
Jim Hawthorne with the Architectural Review Board.
Peg Halloran with ARB representing CBA.
Dean Johnson, chairman, architectural review board.
Bruce King, architectural review board.
Terry King, planning board chairperson and representative to the architectural review board.
Greg Stromo, village engineer.
Jamie Sutphin, planning board attorney.
Bob Baldwin, village attorney.
Kevin Hamilton, Planning Board.
Andrew Nolan, planning board.
Johanna Bach, planning board.
Chris Greer from the planning board.
Okay, so I think, Charlie, the first thing I want to do is move the PDD to the end of the discussion,
Sure.
if that's okay with you.
Yep.
And then let you just run with your presentation of where you started, where we've ended up with the site plan, and go on with your presentation from there.
Okay.
Go over the layout plan.
Sure. Everyone has the plan in front of them. So the sheet on top, just as a refresher, this is the plan that we started with at the beginning of the year. This is dated February 2024, and just to give you a rundown of where we began, we had our access off of Route 31, so north is to the top left of this sheet. Two-way access drive coming in, and that would then present the development in the center of the site where we had 7 residential buildings. We have 4, at this point we had all 4-story buildings on the plan that's in front of you, but we had multiple versions at the time where we had 3-story and 4-story. 3-story closest to Curtis, and then 4-story on the southern side. We had our loop road to access all of the buildings. We had head-in parking adjacent to the buildings, and we also had garages, detached garages that would have parking in front of them as well. We had our central open space that would double as the stormwater management area. Then you would exit, or another entrance to the site off of Salina on the south side with another 2-way access drive. So as we worked through this with the planning board, there were a number of critical items that were brought up. I would say they're all equally weighted. Perhaps at the top of the list was just the village aesthetic and how this didn't meet what would be deemed as a walkable community, a village aesthetic within this development. That carried with it a number of concerns about traffic related to a cut-through where people would use it to get from East Genesee to Salina and vice versa. We really wanted to look at limiting people doing that and how we could curtail that kind of activity. Related to the traffic was parking, where we would have vehicles backing into the primary drive lanes through the site on both sides of that drive lane. So that would pose some traffic concerns throughout the entire site. There was a concern about building height, limiting it to 3-story instead of 4-story. As I mentioned, this plan showed all 4-story. We were mixing that up a little as we were going through our variations of the plan, but the comment was made to look at keeping it to 3-story. So we worked through a number of variations of this plan in particular, but then if you can turn to where we are today, Again, one of the concerns, one of the comments was to look at more of a village aesthetic for the overall development, and I believe Terry put it as we need to see more turns. We need to see the roads more closely related to where we were several years ago. So this plan has gone through a number of variations since 2011. Oh, we're up on, can I stand up and point?
Yeah.
Yes.
Michelle, can you get it full screen?
I didn't realize this was up, I'm sorry. So some of the core principles of the plan remain the same. We still have access off of East Genesee, we still have access off of Salina Street. Those will function as two-way access drive aisles. We're planning on mixed-use commercial development. As we show in this plan, we'll talk about that a little later, how that's gone through some evolution. But as we've modified this plan, we have addressed the concerns that were raised with that initial February plan. All the buildings are now 3-story, so we have 2 different footprints. There's a smaller footprint, which is represented here, 36 units, a larger footprint there, which is 42 units, but they're all 3-story, so we no longer have 4-story on the site. We still have some garage parking, some detached garages. There are 4 of them around the site. And the road network, as you can see, is very different than where we were. We no longer have our loop road through the site, but we've broken that up. We've presented people with a number of turns to get through, again, to curtail that activity of making it a cut through. In addition, one of the comments from a previous version, it wasn't shown on the one we have there, but it's related to our clubhouse. Comment was made about providing more amenity. We know that people moving into this area are looking for a certain level of amenity, and at one point we had shown the clubhouse on the south side. We had moved it over to Salina Street. We had looked at different areas, and based on this new roadway alignment, it really presented us with the opportunity to make that an interior amenity. So we're bringing the clubhouse right into the center of the site. We have an open space to the north of it. We're leaving that just as green space for now, but it could certainly have different features depending on how the design moves forward. Related to the parking, so instead of having long bands of head-in parking where we're messing with the traffic flow, we've brought the parking more closely to each of the buildings. So it functions more as a parking space for that particular building with some garage parking for the various corner spots. We have the parking garages are in the corners there. Our stormwater management has moved to the south in that low spot on the site next to the railroad on the south side there. And on the north side, we have our pedestrian connection up to Curtis Avenue. At one point that was a vehicular connection, but in our discussions going through the various versions here, we've made that a pedestrian connection over to Curtis Ave. On that same side, we're keeping a 50-foot buffer between the garage parking and that property line along the Curtis Avenue residence. So we'll have a 50-foot landscape buffer on that side. As we move further over to Salina Street, we are showing our commercial development blocks there. Another access point off of Salina to get into and out of the site. Just looking at the parking, as I mentioned, that was something that came up initially, was the parking ratio, how many spaces we're providing per unit. On the plan that we have here, we have 280 residential units that's split up among the 7 buildings. We're showing 10 units here, again, we'll discuss that. But right now, we're at approximately 1.6 parking spaces per unit. And that's distributed both in the garage parking, the surface parking that would be head-in near the buildings, and we do have some parallel parking on the streets as well. That covers everything.
Do we make comments?
Yeah, if the board has any comments, certainly.
Well, I'm disappointed in the second version that and initially I had heard talk of an access road to Beagle Supply. You know, they would connect from your entrance road and eliminate one road cut out onto 31. And that access to the proposed future mixed-use development would also be off your two-way drive and not off East Genesee Street. Trying to eliminate
Yeah,
road cuts.
so we have had those discussions and they're amenable to keep talking about it.
Good.
And it's the goal to have that, it's just not finalized.
Okay.
Bruce, one of the things is where the current road is shown, it is east of the driveway to Beeville Supply by quite a bit, so it's not like right next to it like it was. That was one of the things that we talked about. They're also trying to work through, there are some issues with if you come in the two-way road and try and turn into Beeville Supply, their sleeper tractor trailers cannot make that turn. So that was the genesis of that too. I talked to Beeville Supply too.
And there still might need to be a road cut, just be limited to when they would need it, so they'd be.
Yeah, obviously still to work on, but it's not like right next to it like it was, Steve. It's now it's up a little bit further. And I talked to them at Beeville Supply and they're like, you can't make that turn with it because they have sleeper tractor trailers that bring in mulch and pallets of things. Anything else?
That was just the first thing that hit me.
No, it's fine. That's why we're all here jointly.
And as a pedestrian walkway, I'm hoping that we built to specs that would allow an emergency gate to be taken down and an ambulance to access. If access was from 370 31 got blocked, that you'd be able to get emergency vehicles in across the pedestrian.
I don't think we're blocking it.
Well, if we don't put some kind of gating on, how do we stop the lost soul from driving down?
Are you talking about the pedestrian?
Yeah.
Oh, the pedestrian
Yes.
walkway.
So that would just be a sidewalk and we would have landscape on either side.
So what
So
I'm suggesting is if we could build it 10 feet wide or 8 feet wide so that it could handle a police car or an emergency vehicle if need be,
I see, okay.
as opposed to just a 5-foot
So
sidewalk.
that's why you need a gate so the public
Yeah,
isn't. I
yes.
got it. I understand now.
That's my thought.
Yeah.
I mean, if I may, one of my, if I was living over here and I had a 10-foot, like what we've done with the landscape barrier and so much of that is to kind of shield Curtis Ave from all of this. By widening that, we now, it's like putting a picture window to see this when it's maybe not something that they want to see in the first place, but by having a limited, snaking, meandering with some of the foliage there, it kind of shields that, and that's more palatable to the residents on Curtis Ave.
The scale.
So that's just my, take from it.
Valid point.
Well, not to dwell on that one point, but not to get too deep into the details, but when we've had emergency access like that, which would be, of course, just in case of an emergency and intermittent, we could do like a 6-foot wide sidewalk with reinforced grass on either side. We do that on campuses where we know an emergency
So you can
vehicle will
drive
have
on
to
it.
come in, but you don't want it to look like a 10 or 12 foot wide sidewalk all the time.
Yeah,
So
that'd be a good
there's a
solution.
material selection there that we can look at.
Thank you. Anybody else have other comments on the site plan?
So I think since this is the first time that the board's seen it, since it's changed a little bit, just hoping that everyone thinks it's improvement to what we showed a few months ago.
Yes. Yes.
And of course, it's a 3-story is quite a change from the 4-story.
And it's great to have the clubhouse central, I think.
Yeah, I think it works well with the open space
Yeah.
as well, to have a small park space.
Yeah,
there.
there's a lot of green space and a lot of landscaping, and I think that the 50-foot landscape buffer is important towards Curtis.
We would look at landform in there as well, depending on how the drainage
Okay.
can work. So within 50 feet, you're not gonna have too tall of a berm, but we'll have to look at how it would drain water on both sides, obviously, toward the properties and then toward our property. But that's another option to consider in that space.
Okay, get the planting. Okay, makes
How many,
sense.
you guys have experience in this, not me. How many people do you project to reside in the 1 2-bedroom units as a total? I mean, 1 to 2 people.
Yeah.
1.83 or something.
Yeah, we don't have an exact number, but
Right.
it's a mixed bag. It just depends.
And I imagine it changes too.
Yes, everyone.
Did you do a demographic analysis of this area?
Not yet.
Okay. Anybody else?
I know, Joanna, you had a lot of comments when this first came up. Was there anything specifically you would want the town, the village board to know?
No, I mean, I like that the buildings got reduced to 3-story. I think that fits the aesthetic, and I think, you know, looking at the designs that they've come up with, I think this fits in with the village as well. So, I mean, overall, I'm happy with the revisions that they've made and the designs that they've presented.
I think we've come leaps and bounds from the first
for
one.
sure.
Okay, so if there's no more on that, I guess we want to move to the renderings.
Renderings, probably the first one. So just to give a little background in terms of how we got to this rendering, so in the last meeting, we probably presented 5 different styles, so same building, a few different options. Some of the options included different roof styles, different entryways, different ways that we incorporated the stone. Taking some of the comments from all of those different options, we created this mutated option that has some from each option. You know, creating fairly simple gable designs, flat roofs over the bump outs in the entryways. You know, how we treated the stone and different building materials. You have lap siding, you have shiplap, the obviously cultured stone. This is one color variation, and in the printed packets, there's a different color variation to this that has some of the greens. You know, we talked about no blues or reds, I think, or no real bright colors, but we have an option that's a little bit muted. You know, at this point, we don't need to decide on colors, but I think if everyone's comfortable with the way that the building looks, as we go through the process, we'll create true architectural renderings that will show the building details and have that up for discussion. But
Do you have any of the prior plans? Because I know we have the ARB group here today, and
I didn't.
I don't comment on architecture, I'm just facilitating the discussion.
I do.
But, you know, it was just sort of the planning board sort of picking something, and I don't know if this is what the ARB thinks is within the village character and right for this area. So I would be interested in that discussion, and also what the village board thinks of this look. There were a couple of the old ones.
Yeah, we have some down.
I think I got my old ones too. Yeah. There's different variations in here and there if you want to pull them through. We had some with, pull out a couple of the.
I sat in on your last meeting.
Okay.
Some
of them had cutbacks on the roof line. We had one with a
The roof line.
Are the prior ones been uploaded? No, that's.
Yeah, oh yeah, so we did, yeah. So we did make them a little more squattier.
Yeah.
So we reduced the pitch of the roof line.
They're kind of
So it is, everything is a little bit.
That's how we got to where we are with the furniture. I don't really need them that.
But it would mimic whatever we decided.
Like the second one.
Pointed
So,
out,
in my mind, it'd be, you know, left
we had kind of
side.
that barn look on a couple of them.
Yeah.
The head roofs are didn't like that at all.
Taking the same elements. Keeping it the same, I think we want to do different. No blue.
It's still not there.
Try to do a little more red around here.
Yeah.
Type style, I mean, red and black.
We like the entry on those, the flat entry that you see in these, but not the double gable. We like the tower with the flat roof.
So, pretty much what they've developed.
Yeah. Yeah, they took all our comments.
Proposal to pick one of your renderings, or in your collection of 6, 8 buildings, would you vary multiple color? I know it's more expensive to keep.
No, color's easy. So
Just some,
if you wanted.
so it doesn't all, so it's not a rubber stamp building after building look the same.
Right.
No,
Same style.
It'd be the same building,
Same style,
but it
different siding
has a little
colors.
different skin on it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we can certainly create different variations as you move through the property.
I like the new with the green and the taupes.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Well, the new ones definitely are an improvement.
Yeah.
That was a lot better.
We'd like to keep the same building style, but if we change different colors, then, yeah, we can make it look a little different.
I think that'd be nice, actually.
Can you speak to actual materials yet, or is that a little further down the road?
So this, I mean, these are typically vinyl siding and lightweight cultured stone. This is showing metal roof is on top of that, yeah.
On these little pieces?
Correct.
I know it's kind of a first time for this group. Are they headed in the right path? Because they'll come, this is going to come back. This is just sort of our preliminary, meeting for this part.
Yeah, I would say so.
Bruce, what do you think? Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I think as long as you think we can work with it, with what we have, then with some minor tweaks as we go through the process. So.
I feel like the direction is right. Just final material choices and color choices to kind of flesh it out.
Yeah, I think the variation of the different materials and colors is very attractive and a lot more interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, they're decent sized buildings and having to be monotone, not having to be broken up, I think is not the right thing to do.
It's a little bit almost townhouse looking, obviously, not literally. Maybe with a little, but that's what we were trying to accomplish, something that had an interesting facade, and even if it did not have a lot of in and out play, that it at least looked like it did, so it breaks down that big facade.
Yeah, I think that's successful.
Ray, you had mentioned something about the dead-end parking area creating an issue.
Well, I think with some of these, with some of the code is some of the issues with that end on fire engines and fire departments, get in and out. And maybe we've got to get a couple connections here and there on the part by the railroad, and maybe not, just to double check.
Sure. Yeah, I saw your comment there.
We've run into that a couple times. Somebody likes it.
What's that?
All of a sudden nobody likes the long dead end. So maybe, maybe if you need to connect a couple of them. you can look at that.
Everyone has bigger trucks now.
Yeah. Wow, they can't drive.
I don't like the back.
Okay, any other comments on the renderings? No? Okay, so I guess we'll move on then to review the revised long-form EAF. Brody, is that you?
Well, I know that we just submitted this and probably didn't give Greg enough time to go through it, but this is just an updated draft of the long form. I think as we have some of these other conversations that we're looking to have with the PDD, it's gonna dictate some changes to the long form, but.
Okay.
So what do you think the highlights are? And
Where's the summary?
there's the summary.
Cliff notes.
Sticking points, since we haven't looked at it yet.
Well, I think the site plan speaks to the highlights. I don't think there's anything that particularly drew our attention as a red flag. I know that the mapper automatically will identify certain things, like bald eagles, for instance. Our environmental group didn't witness any nests on site. They're pretty easy to pick out generally because they're enormous. So there are certain things like that. The sturgeon is on there because of the river. We don't expect them to be on site, obviously. So there are certain things like that that are automatically triggered when we go through it. There were some environmental concerns on page 4. Let's talk about wetlands. So page 4. So there are 6 wetlands on site, totaling about 1 acre for all 6 of them. They are not DEC, they're core, so we're working through the jurisdictional determination with them on that. It's a bit of a lengthy process, but we have a project manager assigned, which is step 1. So we're in contact with them to try to move that forward as quickly as possible, determine what needs to happen with those. So that is an ongoing conversation with them.
I know that is taking a while these
Yes,
days.
it is.
What is your anticipation on timeline, if you can even?
So our goal is to have it taken care of by the end of the year. And expedited as much as possible. The last correspondence we had with them is that we're in their queue. They're aware of our project, and the way they phrased it was that other projects get expedited if there's a particular concern with them. So that bumps you down the queue. So at this point, we're not critical in their eyes, so we're not at the top of the list, but we're on the list, which is step 1. So our goal is to have it wrapped up by the end of the year with core.
So like, and a lot of these are things that, you know, we'll look at, and maybe we have a discussion whether we, you know, agree or disagree with something. The main things I'm worried about is making sure you've got the right interested agencies involved, so we can get those things, you know, get them going, get those things going.
Okay.
I want to make sure about the environmental issues on the site. If there's any on site that needs to be cleaned up, you know, we know just the scope of those things, and whether that particular land can be used or not used. The wetlands are obviously just a roadblock for anything else. We do, I do need to deal with drainage, and that there's some issues there. You got a pretty significant amount of drainage coming down.
Yeah, we'll get into that detail.
So, you know, we need to, at some point, we need to get into that.
Right.
And, you know, the amount of water used, sewage generated, and trash, and that sort of thing need to be part of the, you know, thing we're working on, whether there's any issues with off-site capacities for sewage and water.
Right.
And we'll have that figured out shortly.
We had those estimates in here.
Yep. Yeah, and that's, should be fine. I mean, I don't see any other critical things except maybe archaeological. Gotta hit that. There's a lot of sensitive sites in the area.
Yeah.
Those are things that kind of hold everything up.
So we would typically do that as part of the SWIP, to go through SHPO, through the CRIS system. Is that something you would recommend doing well in advance of the SWIP?
I would, because I think by the time you get final approval, you're basically gonna hand, I would say, a complete set of construction documents and go to the board.
Right.
So it's not, it's a very detailed end product. It's not like a typical zone change where you know, you might be kind of close right now to having enough, you know, planning and engineering and stuff done. So I think, you know, if you get to the point where you feel comfortable, I would pull it sooner than later.
Okay. Yeah, we can start that consultation, and the goal is to get that letter of no
And
effect.
being that there's
so.
nothing there, you know, those, like the wetlands, those things can take some time to
Sure.
get through the system.
Okay,
So those are the big holdups that I look at is, you know, all of a sudden you get run into a roadblock from a review standpoint.
okay.
Okay.
Have you started processes with OSIDA?
Not yet.
They have no idea this is coming down the pike, or they do, or?
I introduced it to them informally in a meeting, but not formally.
And what are you thinking about?
We're thinking about a pilot.
Yeah, but what? Workforce?
Yeah.
How long a period of time?
You want to go into the,
Yeah, I can talk a little bit. So OSIDA has a document called the UTEP, which is the rules, you know, that apply to all of them. They're not necessarily varied, you know, from project to project. So the UTEP for market apartments is only going to allow a pilot to last with benefits for 3 years. If you include affordable housing at different levels, that the length of the real property tax benefits increase to 10 or 12 years. There's also a longer period for senior housing.
What about the workforce housing?
What's that?
What about workforce housing?
So workforce housing, if you go to 10%, you could get a 10-year pilot. If you go to 20%, you can get a 12-year pilot.
so we've discussed in the planning board meeting the workforce pilot, which would require that 10% of the units be affordable for people that are making 80% AMI or less. We don't know exactly what the rules are.
Yeah, so the AMI is the average median income for the metro area. It's done by metro area. So right now, and it varies a bit year by year because the Department of Labor puts out statistics, it's about $90,000. So someone to be eligible for it would need to make 80% of that household income. And then for the affordable housing, the IDA will dictate the rent ceilings according to a matrix that they put out that's on their website. The way that the pilot works, it's not that you don't pay property tax for 10 years. It's that it decreases 10% every year until in the 10th year you pay 100%. So you pay 100% in the last year, 90% the second to last, 80%, so forth.
And it's fixed on the current assessment. That's where it starts, right?
Not necessarily. They'll determine an assessment, a value. So no, it's not based on the assessment as vacant, no. It'll be, the assessment is built out, value of the property.
So it will be assessed at full value and then you'll have an exemption. So we're in the process of doing a study right now on another project in Manlius that kind of incorporates this new UTEP that the county's done. So that's for a 300 unit complex. So it can provide, you know, what the project would make if nothing happened, or excuse me, what the property would pay in taxes if nothing happened, what would it pay if it was full taxes, what would it pay with the different programs that are in the UTEP right now. And we should have that probably middle of next month, so and we're more than happy to share it. And it also shows the cost benefit of the impact that, you know, a 300 or 270 unit project would have on the community in terms of sales, you know, jobs, not just on the property, but off the property. Impacts to schools, impact to fire, impact to police. So we are gonna have a comprehensive report on that project that we can share with all the boards.
So in the workforce housing, that's geared toward what demographic?
So it's not low-income housing, it's not Section 8 housing. Workforce housing is, so when we say, you know, it's geared towards 80% of AMI, so people making, the AMI will float, but people making 80% of that. So now, it would be people making about 70 grand a year, so somebody like that.
Okay.
Household income though, not individual?
Household income,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
So they're working people.
Yes. Okay. All right. Anything else on this part of the discussion? Bruce? No? Okay. So then we're on to the traffic impact study, and I know Greg, you did a summary today for that. I don't know if everybody's had a chance to.
Very brief.
Yes, it was brief. You didn't have a lot of.
Big report.
There's a lot of paper there.
Yeah.
Got a lot of paper there.
I don't deny that. Synchro printouts take a lot of volume.
So I'll let you run with that since you, here, I have your sheet. Oops.
Did you guys get this?
Yes.
And that goes through like all the minor site plan stuff from before. And with the traffic, I had a concern relative to the days they were done.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on that. I'm not sure how much you want me to run through the study.
No, I'm okay with the only other, we just wanted, and we brought this up at the beginning, we wanted to be involved with discussions with DOT relative, between this and other projects that are being, floated around. It's a big concern for the village, and so we do want to be part of those discussions with DOT. Those are the two main things at this point, to be honest with you. I got through, about the first 10 pages.
You want to provide some highlights?
Yeah, so the primary report's the 18 pages, that's the written part. The rest of it is just a lot of supporting documentation that he's gonna look at and probably no one else is gonna really pay a lot of attention to. I want to touch on the traffic volumes. So we collected the traffic counts. First off, the study area for the project basically is Route 31 from Mechanic Street to the Baldwinsville bypass, and 370 from the same intersection to the bypass, so the big triangle, essentially. And then we also included a couple intersections along Oneida Street because, as requested, we put together a combined study for both this development and the 19 Phillips Street proposed apartments on the corner of Phillips and Oneida. The study area was ultimately dictated by state DOT because both primary roadways are DOT jurisdiction. We collected the traffic counts for the weekday morning, weekday evening, and Saturday midday periods. The counts were collected on March 28th. I can follow my own report. Thursday, March 28th, and Saturday, March 30th. I understand there are some concerns with the validity of the counts. The Thursday, schools were in full session. Good Friday, they were not in session. Saturday, typically Easter falls before spring break week. This year it was 3 weeks before spring break. So really school primarily impacts the morning peak hour. The evening peak hour is generally after school is out. There may be some sporting stuff going on, but it's not the full school operation in the afternoon.
Why didn't you measure traffic from 2:30 to 4:30 on Oneida Street?
Why didn't I?
Yeah, that's when the traffic's there.
Well, I certainly understand. The primary focus of the study is the major corridors, which is 31 and 370, and those volumes peak at the rush hours. So ultimately, the recommendation from the study to signalize the intersection of Oneida and 31 would significantly benefit the school operation midday as well. I have completed studies for the Baldwinsville school campus, I believe last year or the year before. So I can look back at those studies and get some ideas on how the traffic volumes compare on Oneida. But ultimately the volumes on 31 and 370 would be notably lower as compared to the rush hour.
I'm just noting when the afternoon buses roll, every bus stops at the railroad track.
Yeah, I mean, school operations are an interesting animal because it's a surge of traffic. You know, school really happens in about a 15 to 20 minute window when that primary flow is. And I understand there's two of those with Baldwinsville with the 2 school entry and the 2 school exit. But ultimately, if you look at the street volumes, you'll see a significant uptick during the evening rush hour versus the afternoon rush hour. But, so just kind of to run through the study really quickly, we collected the standard data that we do for an impact study, turning movement counts at the 11 study area intersections, I believe. Gap data on Route 31 and 370. So we physically time the gaps in traffic to identify the available windows for people to turn on and off the side roads. Spot speed measurements to identify operating speeds versus the speed limit. Sight distance measurements at the proposed access points so that we can compare that to design values based on the operating speeds. And then the other data, geometry, signal timing data from the state, all the stuff we need to run the capacity models. Touching back on the question about the traffic volumes, the peak hours we identified were 7 to 8 in the morning, 4:30 to 5:30 in the evening, and 11:45 to 12:45 on a Saturday. We looked at historical traffic volume data from New York State DOT on both Route 31 and 370 to compare their peak hour volumes to our peak hours to make sure, order of magnitude, that our volumes are representative. The Route 31 volumes were compared to traffic counts from October of 2023, so less than 6 months old. Our traffic counts were generally equal to or 5% higher than the historical counts during both the morning and evening peak hours. And similarly on Route 370, our traffic counts were 5 to 17% higher than 2018 volumes that DOT had on their website. So that comparison gave us comfort level that our volumes were representative of what we see out here. Based on the gap data, and I understand that 31 is a congested corridor through here, 370 not quite as much. The volumes are notably lower during the evening peak hour. They're about the same during the morning. The physical timed gaps in traffic indicate that there are sufficient gaps in traffic to turn on and off the side roads. There are periods of delay, primarily associated with the school rush and the evening heavier volumes, but the timed gaps are sufficient to accommodate the projected turning movements. And observed delays on the side streets were generally in the range of what the models show, which were acceptable levels. Spot speed data in the area, generally operating speeds are in that 30 to 40 miles an hour, which is a little bit higher than the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit, but we based all of our analysis and sight distance on the operating speed, which is a bit higher. Reviewing sight distances from the proposed driveways, everything has adequate design sight distances, with the one exception being the Bronze Foundry driveway to Route 370, looking to the right toward the bridge. That bridge does create a slight restriction. The recommended sight distance is 500 feet. The available based on the crown of the bridge is 425. So I did recommend that some driveway ahead warning signage be considered at that location. That is not an obstruction that can be addressed because you can't really change the elevation of the bridge. So going beyond that, accident analysis, we did a full accident analysis of the study area using the most recent 3 years worth of accident data obtained from the state, which is the standard practice. And then we calculate accident rates and compare them to statewide averages. In general, all of the intersections in the study area are below or at the statewide average level. We noted that the Route 31 Baldwinsville bypass intersection is slightly above. The Route 31 Oneida Street intersection is slightly above the statewide average. The other ones are all, and the odd one was the Oneida Phillips Street intersection, which is an always stop. It only had 3 accidents, but the rate is above because if you compare the volumes on Oneida Street and Phillips Street, it's much lower than 31. So when you have that lower volume, it tends to skew the accident rate a little bit, but that one was one of the higher discrepancies. The overall links, looking at Route 31, Route 370, the overall links have statewide average rates that are higher than the rates we're seeing. So there's no red flag in the accident analysis that says we have a critical problem in the area. Capacity analysis, overall, we use the standard synchro model to analyze the operations of all the intersections. Everything is operating pretty well in the area. There are some longer delays coming off of Oneida Street onto 31, which I think everyone is well aware of. I've seen that through multiple studies over the years. It's a difficult left turn movement, and it's primarily a left turn movement. The other location where we see some significant delays are the 370-31 Mechanic Street intersection. The left turn movements all have levels of service in the range of E, and for everyone's edification, when we talk about levels of service, it's just like school. We grade it A to F. A through D is generally acceptable. Levels of service E's and F we're not so fond of. A lot of those delays are based on protected only turn movements, so it's not necessarily capacity, it's more the operation of the signal. The background condition, we grew the volumes 5 years out, assuming that the development would be built over about a 5-year period. Looking at historical growth in the area, we used a 1% per year growth, so we grew all the volumes by 5%. We did contact the village, and there were no other approved developments to be included specifically in the study, so the background condition is purely the growth. Not a big change in level of operation with a 5% growth in traffic. So then we get into the actual development. Trip generation estimates for the Browns Foundry development using standard IT methods, which is the kind of the, lack of a better word, the Bible for traffic engineers estimating traffic. The overall development's expected to generate approximately 100 to 120 vehicles in and out during the peak hours. One of the common questions I get is, you're building residential units, people expect 2 trips per unit. So if you say 270 units, we're expecting 500 trips in and out. There's a number of reasons why you don't have that level of volume. Single occupancy residencies, people going to work at different times of the day. A portion of people leave at 6:30 in the morning, a portion of people leave at 7:30 in the morning. Likewise, it's staggered coming back. People work from home, people on vacation, lots of different factors. I have done probably hundreds of traffic counts of residential areas, and the trip generation rates are very consistent with ITE. Rarely do I see any discrepancy off of the projections from the ITE numbers. So there is a comfort level to the estimates that we developed. So we did 3 build scenarios. We did a build scenario with just this development, a build scenario with just the 19 Phillips Street development, and a build scenario with both developments combined to see if there was a cumulative impact of the 2 developments together. In general, the overall impacts on the study area were not significant. There were some minor drops in level of service, C to D or B to C with a 1 to 2, 3-second increase in delay. The primary area that we noticed an impact was the Mechanic Street signal. Some of those levels of service E dropped to F. So we in the improvement analysis, we looked at signal timing adjustments and were able to compensate for the change in travel pattern with timing adjustments. The primary location that I noted was the Oneida Street approach to Route 31, where it was levels of service E today. It drops to levels of service F during the PM and the Saturday. I went through and did signal warrant analyses for that intersection under the build condition, and even with the build volumes, they don't meet the warrants for a traffic signal. However, in my opinion, not only is it a benefit in the fact that it provides a protected exit out of that area, out of the school, it will also draw left turn movements from Pine, Spruce, and Phillips that are now trying to turn onto Route 31. That traffic would naturally now go to the signal where it would have a protected turn movement. So I believe that the traffic that it will draw on top of the existing traffic substantiates the warrant for a signal at that location. With a signal there, that approach improves to levels of service B or C during the peak hours. I think it would be a significant improvement for that overall area. Beyond that, there's no other mitigation recommended. With the relatively low trip generation, the turning movements are comparable to some of the existing turning movements off of 31 at the other adjacent streets in the area. So the recommendation is the traffic signal, the warning signage for the driveway on 370, and some timing adjustments at Mechanic Street. And I'm happy to take any questions or discuss.
Yeah, just a question. I mean, you kind of touched on a few of the notes that I was reading. The turn gap and delay data was inclusive of both projects, even though we're really just kind of thinking about this one. But what I'm hearing is that you feel that there's the capacity could be there for both projects if they ever occur.
Yes.
Currently based off of that data.
Yeah, the study, as I said, was completed for both. I'm focusing on this one obviously tonight, but the study included both developments. We did a full build with both developments. And as I noted, the primary impact was at Oneida Street. Both developments kind of had the same impact on the intersection. This one more because it's adding through traffic on 31. That one more because it's adding traffic on Oneida. So together, the impact's a little more significant because of the combined, but the signal will address both.
And that was the other thing that jumped out from what I was able to review once you had was that specific light of the Oneida recommendation. And it seemed like in what you just shared was that it would reduce the volume that would flow through Mechanic, Spruce, Pine, where people are maybe trying to cut through there because they know they can't get off at Oneida now. If there was a light there, it would alleviate a little bit of the congestion in those areas.
Yeah, I didn't specifically project what it would divert. That's a difficult kind of crystal ball to really project. But given the volumes that they're taking, it would make sense. I'm not going to come down Pine Street and try to turn left if there's a signal, 500 feet to my left.
Great.
My bad.
I think I'm not sure if you're familiar with our bus garage for Baldwinsville, where that is. I mean, since the original proposed 19 Phillips Street project, previous to the one proposed now, it was brought up heavily that the school buses would come up Oneida and go up, Phillips to 60, and now they all come, the bulk of them will go out Mechanic Street. So now the turn is now a lot of them will be able to come all the way up Oneida because now they have a sure way out as well, and so it's interesting because now again any bus that has to go across the tracks, it's automatically. It's quite a, so that's just during school, But the other thing just as a resident, I live on the corner of Phillips and Oneida. Okay. So I have, at my window, the traffic study that doesn't show you there is the amount of near misses. I cannot tell you, every other day you'll hear tires squealing, fingers flying, shouts, going, and we've had a decrease since that initial project of heavy traffic, tractor trailers coming through there. But when they do come, they do not stop. And so there's a lot of, when people come off of 31, that it doesn't matter if it says stop means stop on it, they do not, you're coming down 31, it's just a nice quick right and you're off. So there's quite a bit that doesn't get captured in that study that, I just sit there, I actually put a camera up just to sit there and watch all these different occurrences, but that's definitely a concern of mine, not just as a resident, but it's getting left out of there. I think the light changes some, but the ignorance of some drivers will still prevail there, and that's not.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's the old saying, you can't fix stupid. People. I hear a lot of stories about that, and sitting on the corner watching traffic for 2 hours, I've seen a lot. So I certainly understand that, and ultimately we have to rely on the data. So the hard numbers are what they are.
And Chuck, did you have any comments?
I was just wondering on the light itself, who puts the light up and maintains it? We don't, the village doesn't have any lights. We don't have any traffic lights. And we just had an issue with one here. That was up for 30 years, and then the person that put it up didn't want to maintain it anymore, and we got it taken care of, but who would maintain it?
Jurisdictionally, I would assume that this would become a state signal.
Okay.
Normally, once it's implemented, it's turned over to the person that controls the roadway. So,
Which would be the state?
Which would be the state.
Right, okay. I'm the superintendent, by the way.
Yeah.
That was an issue we had here a few years ago.
Yeah, it's a little different when it's a signal at a driveway, for like say a shopping plaza. Perfect example is I just did a project in New Hartford across from the Hannaford Center, and we wanted to fix the fourth leg of the signal, and it turned out that even though it's on Commercial Drive, which is a 6-lane state roadway, it was a privately owned signal by the plaza. So we had to work with them. But typically, when it's at 2 roadways, that would be turned over to the...
Because that's really going to be critical, because the timing in those lights are just, I live on Salina Street, and the hours that you picked are the busiest times, and they move that traffic within 20 minutes. But if any of those lights get off their timing, in the 4 corners or that one, it's going to mess everything up. So as long as it's controlled by the state, I'm sure it'll work.
Can you study, project which way people are going to turn going in, future residents? Because your study ended at Mechanic Street. Ballsville suffers east of Mechanic Street where all the stuff tries to get through the 4 corners.
Yeah, ultimately, I mean, the study area we picked was based on DOT requirements. We do have a distribution of the traffic to and from the site based on traffic patterns in the area. I kind of glossed over that, but just to give you a really quick idea. Based on the traffic patterns, we're projecting that 35% of the traffic would be to and from the east on Route 31, going out toward all the commercial and the highway. 35% to and from the west on either 31 or Oneida, depending on which development we're looking at. 20% to or from the east on 370, then 10% to and from the north on Mechanic and Phillips. It's all based on the existing traffic patterns. So we do have some of that, but we didn't project further into the village based on the study area.
I know I'm right. So figure 12, the alignment with Mechanic Street is incorrect.
So it's not, you might notice a little tiny note in the bottom corner says not to scale.
But you have Mechanic Street connected to 370 and it doesn't.
Well, it's offset.
Okay.
It's part of the signal.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, you're
It's
right.
one set of lights right there.
Yeah, I realize that the
It's
signal,
all
it's a kind of a big convoluted, but
Yeah.
as a signal, it operates as one intersection.
Okay,
So that's why I depict it that way, because
All right.
those are the volumes we're putting through that signal.
traffic license.
Yeah, I'm not the greatest artist in the world.
Okay. And actually, there's also a weird offset where Spruce, and I guess that's the driveway to Beeville Supply because they don't line up across.
Yeah, they are
either.
slightly offset.
Yeah, so that's actually part of the traffic problem there. It's almost worse because they're offset by 20 feet. So I think, you come out of Beeville Supply and you want to
hang
turn
it
left to go back to the village, yeah, you would have to go left and right, but you're crossing 2 lanes of traffic and what's coming out of Spruce. So those are the pinch points to me.
Yeah, one of the good things about how Spruce and the Beeville Supply is laid out is that opposing lefts are not crossing each other's path.
I agree.
Because
I
that,
agree,
if they were offset the other way, that would
Look
be
at
a
Aldi
significant
down here,
problem.
that's terrible with the shopping center, I agree with that, but it does give you pause to pull out of there and turn left.
Certainly.
And I think those are kind of the similar things around are the pinch points that people are concerned about. Yes, there are peak traffic, yes, there are peak backups. I live on a busy main street here, and I will tell you, there are generally 2 times a day that the traffic backs up way in front of my house, and it's school, and it's 2 turns of the light, and then it's gone. You know, so that's what you're talking about, I think, in the school thing.
Yeah.
But there are some other weird pinch points like that that just make movements difficult. And absolutely right, if you're coming in 31, you absolutely hang a right on Oneida if you want to go to the north side, but you never come out Oneida and turn left.
It's a tough left turn.
Yeah.
And you never turn on Oneida at 2:15 to 4.
Right.
Never get through.
Right. I think that's, you know, I've said this before to the group, we that live in the village and have lived here for a long time, you know what time to go where and how to get around it, and when to scoot up Oneida and east Oneida and come down through the village instead of waiting at the traffic light. You know, there are those things, and I would say a lot of it's peak. You know, it's the peak traffic times. Don't come through Friday night from Route 31 into the village. Absolutely.
Left out of the post office.
Go some other way. You know, it's and people are adept at that, which is one of the reasons we were so concerned about the arrangement of the site plan, because this sort of loop road, bang, people would be through there like crazy, which is why we worked so hard with them to change that configuration so it's not attractive to meander through all of those
No, and I do agree with that. I think
intersections.
it's good that it's not laid out to be a primary cut through. Because as you get closer to the signal, you know, those cut throughs become much more attractive.
Yes, yeah. Craig, did you have anything else?
Nope.
Chuck? No? Anybody else have any other questions, concerns that they want to discuss?
Obviously, we'll have a full review of
Yes.
the traffic report, so this is just preliminary info.
Okay. And then I think we're back to the PDD, if I'm correct.
So,
And I'm going to preface that we all have not reviewed this, so.
oh, sure,
Yeah, I mean, just,
well, I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about it. I'm going to start just a little bit with the process. You've got, and some of this is for the benefit of people who are hearing about this for the first time. You have a chapter in your zoning code, which is chapter 345, and that creates the Plan Development District. The Plan Development District is what's known in planning as a floating zone. Everybody knows about commercial, industrial, residential zoning, and this site actually has all 3 types of zoning districts present on this site, though the vast majority of the site is zoned industrial. What a PDD allows the board to do, ultimately the authority rests with the Village Board of Trustees, is to land a quote-unquote floating zone in any location in the village. And the purpose is to promote integrated plans for larger types of development. Specifically, what the law says, developments that constitute an integrated plan for residential, shopping, business, or industrial purposes, or an appropriate combination of those. And this has a little bit of a combination of those because there's both residential and commercial components to the plan. In terms of the sequence of events, we initially went to the elected board, the Board of Trustees, and gave our initial draft of the plan to get feedback and made some changes based on that feedback. Then we went to the planning board, and it says in your code that the development plan approval should be referred to the planning board and work our way through the planning board until eventually there's something called a PDD, is developed, so a planned development district and a planned development district map, which is what we're working on through this process. Ultimately, the planning board will make a recommendation and the final decision will be made by the Board of Trustees. So the document which we've just presented to you, and this is, there's been some changes. First of all, this document was provided at the very beginning of this process months ago to the Board of Trustees, but in anticipation of this meeting, we've made some changes because we also made some changes through our process with the planning board that changed the configuration of the project. So I will just hit a few of the highlights. It's a relatively short document. This is the fourth, if this was adopted, this would be the fourth PDD that the village has adopted. They all follow this format. We tried very carefully to follow your format that you already have established. Initially, it states the parcels that would be part of the PDD, the approximate acreage, about 15, 16 acres, depending on how you count it, and that'll be more precise when we get to the end. It says the uses that will be permitted. Right now, multiple family dwellings, obviously, with the apartment buildings, covered parking, and accessory structures. And then in the commercial district, we borrowed your existing use designations in that area, so retail, restaurant, shops, offices, things like that. In terms of getting into the development plan, it states in a PDD that the PDD has to be constructed in conformance with the map. So the map that is essentially standing in as a site plan, which is what the process the planning board's going through. So the proposed development district regulations here reference the map. It references a maximum height of 3 stories. That's been adjusted down from when we went to your board before, and it was 4. It creates setbacks. We created a setback of 50 feet from the back line of the Curtis Street properties to make sure that there was adequate vegetative buffering there. We did change something significantly from our first version. We were mimicking your setbacks in those districts, anticipating a 40-foot setback from specifically from Salina Street. We now realize that from a planning point of view, you actually want the buildings as close as you can to the street, not far away. You don't want parking in front of the buildings in your commercial area. So we've actually flipped that and said that the building shall be no more than 15 feet from the street to match your overlay and to accommodate, to be more consistent with the village's zoning. We're proposing 1.5 parking spaces per dwelling unit ratio, and that we just follow the commercial parking. Right now, our plans exceed that threshold, but that's a placeholder threshold for now. And finally, we have the PDD dictate that there must be a pedestrian-only connection to Curtis rather than a vehicle connection. And that sums up the PDD. That's something that we hope when we get to the point in the process for referral from the planning board to the Board of Trustees, in addition to the map, that a document or a document like this with the appropriate adjustments would be recommended to the Board of Trustees along with the proposed plan development district map. So I'll stop there for questions.
I would urge the planning board to be detailed. Be detailed in what we put in. Like, I would love to see no drive-throughs. I don't even know the Dunkin' Donuts. Well, I'd like to see those details in the PDD. The PDD in Ballsville becomes codified, so it's the law.
Several of us already made that note.
Yeah, so if you want to change something, it's now going to go back to the legislative body that created it.
Yeah, we purposely did not include drive-throughs and things like that.
Filling stations.
We're happy to put an affirmative statement in a drive-through.
Well, and it also perhaps, because, again, if you put in restaurants, you've got parking requirements that are different from something else. So there needs to be a mechanism in there for the approval of whatever retail, because a substantial portion of this is vacant right now. So whether we use special permits or, you know, however that happens, there needs to be some control over the retail establishments that go in, so that they are, in addition to the site plan, that the, I mean, for example, gasoline stations, things like that. There should be some control over how it's going to be set up and what retail uses actually go in.
I thought that what we were going to do was take this and put it in words, right? If the board and everyone kind of sits here tonight and it really just by a straw vote or generally agrees, hey, this is going in the right direction, and this is what you want there, and you don't want it to vary a whole lot, right? Then I think that's what we're trying to do, get this picture in words, right? And I know it's attached, but
I would also point out that I realize that the commercial properties are not part of this site plan approval, but they would be in the PDD, correct? So we've talked
On the
about,
Salina Street
we've
side.
talked about how we're on the Salina Street side only.
Yeah, we're,
I mean, that's up for discussion.
It's up for discussion.
We've talked about
Okay.
it, and
Yeah.
do we
Well,
just
for
want to
instance,
keep, do we just want to keep the stuff on 31, you know, in the overlay that
Okay.
is currently there?
because you
Okay.
got an overlay there that works.
Right, so one of the things is, you know, with retail restaurants, we don't want any parking in front of the building.
oh, it's in there.
You know, which we've discussed at the planning
And we
board.
made that adjustment in reaction to that the buildings could be no further than 15 feet
Well,
from the
you
road.
still could park in the front.
15
You could
feet.
pave it right in off the highway, and somebody would say, where's your sidewalks? And you drive over the sidewalks, so no.
I'm gonna recommend no backing out under 31.
Thank you.
But I hear what Dan is saying, and I think that's, I think that we understand that mission.
Yes,
And Bob as the village attorney and myself and
I think we're on
a few
it,
people were.
because we've actually
Yes.
touched on some of these things
Yes,
in the
and,
planning
and,
board
and
meetings.
some of, and we've had some, not all the PDDs we've done have been, we're getting better at it. Let me just put it that way. And we're gonna be better at it, and we're gonna be best at it, you know, this
Yeah.
time around.
The only
So-
thing I would say in terms of in my experience, caution of getting too descriptive of the exact site plan is, I have bumped in the past where you have a PDD that gets so narrow that every time a tenant leaves,
Oh,
you
yeah.
have to go back to the elected board to amend it,
I
like you
get
lose pizza and you know, it's a sandwich shop or something, you know what I mean? So you don't want to be so restrictive. It does still need to read like a zoning regulation.
Can you
Not like
make
a site plan.
pizza?
Yeah, but you know what I mean. If there's if something is, you know, within these categories,
I mean,
you
the
know.
question then becomes whether the parking regulations, for example, in the normal zoning code apply inside the PDD, because you've got it, you know, it's a different situation, so, and that's why I just said, it's unknown right now what's gonna go in there, so just needs to be some mechanism to have some review and control over how.
Yeah, we
that's
agree
developed.
that your underlying zoning parking restrictions should apply to the commercial properties. We agree. Yeah.
And the developer's open to the concept of having the PDD include all the way to 370 if the planning board feels that strengthens things.
Yes, I think on the Salina Street side,
Yeah.
that makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah, he said that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Just
was
wanted to
30, it was
verify.
31 that was the question.
31's a little up in the air for lots of reasons,
Yeah.
as to whether the PD should cover that,
Right.
or if you should just go with your existing zoning. That'll be a conversation we'll have to continue.
In the overlay district. Okay. So my planning board, we got some homework to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's that legal and engineering has to come up with
Yeah. Some also,
something,
yeah.
right? And then we'll get together.
But we should be prepared to discuss it at our next meeting, I think, some of this. right?
Probably.
Yeah. Okay. All right, any other questions from any board members?
Including ZBA, since we actually had some ZBA people in there.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Yeah, it was
That's
great.
it, yeah.
It was honestly
Yeah.
very efficient to get everybody together, and I appreciate everybody spending another evening and getting together on short notice to work on this, so I do appreciate it on everybody's behalf. Jamie and Mr. Baldwin, do you guys want to help us with what they should be doing next, what's procedure, how do we proceed from here?
Well, I think right now, we're here kind of, I think we've heard comments, right? This traffic study has to get big time reviewed, right?
Yeah.
There's still, I mean, the SWIP isn't even thought about. So, but I think we can come up with now trying to get this PDD in somewhat order. And, you know, I think that architectural should be part of this PDD as well. And just, I mean, procedural, I think it's just a, like, let's keep going kind of thing, right?
But I
Let's
was
start
trying
the
to put
reviews.
some milestones and what we should be
Yeah.
doing. Do you want to maybe develop something and then send it out? Would that be easier?
Yeah, why don't Barney and I discuss what he
You know,
sees?
so that we all have goals.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it won't.
We'll get a timeline going, kind of
Steps, goals,
expectations.
what each individual board should be working on and doing.
Right.
So that we're.
Right, so we do know that the planning board is the lead agency, so we're the ones who are gonna be doing the seeker process. And those notices still have to go out, but I've not had anyone else ever say they want to be lead. I know that the village board is expecting the planning board to be lead agency. But nonetheless, I will, you know, knock on Bob's door next door to mine to talk about anything that is on the mind of the village board. So we'll work on this, but a lot of it is going to be, like, it's gonna be a work in progress until we get through the seeker, SWIP, and traffic, which is really part of
Are you
that.
planning any signage at the entrances?
Probably, yes. So that would be part of the site plan package.
Craig, is this going to require anything beyond phase one because of Jardine historically?
Yeah, phase one, for what reason?
Because of a foundry having been there.
Oh, phase
Some
one,
of-
phase,
Yeah.
well, that depends on what the phase one comes up with.
So we've already done some additional testing on the
I was gonna
ground.
say, I'd be shocked if
We
it
done
didn't.
phase two? I forgot, we get mixed up. I don't think so. But we do have data now. Working with DEC because we know that they have been focused on the site previously. And there's discussions going on with that in terms of if any cleanup is necessary, to what extent.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I'd be shocked if it didn't trigger some kind of phase two. The extent of it depends on what the phase one came up with. And I mean, I think we would like to have, you know, copies of that stuff as, you know, just so we know what's happening with stormwater and, you know, what the impacts could be.
So we're regulated by state DEC, and so they have soil levels for different uses. So the fact that we're proposing residential use, they're gonna hold us to the strictest. So any development is gonna make the site cleaner, not less so.
What are these brownfield programs? I don't know if it's a brownfield.
Nobody knows, yeah.
That's what we're exploring.
Okay. Anybody else have any other comments? And I guess we'll talk and maybe you and Bob
I
can
guess
come
the
up with
question
a
is, does
procedure.
everyone feel like we're going full steam ahead on this? That was, I know it's a real, village board doesn't actually have to do anything until this comes back, but the idea was, hey, we don't want everybody to do a lot of work, and then village board be like, oh, we don't like anything about this. So I guess that's.
Any red flags?
Nothing jumps out. I mean,
Okay.
phase
There you
2
go,
can address
another
some
green.
sidewalks and
Thank you.
commercial areas. I see that's not in the plan now, but that's a phase 2
Sidewalks.
thing you could do, but everything else looks
Is this going to be developed in phases?
Not really.
Okay.
It'll be a
All one
continuous
phase?
project.
You're gonna put a landscape buffer along the mixed development usage in the future commercial development block with the residentials? Because there isn't any on the plan. Like along this way and this way, more importantly, right here, it doesn't seem like there's a whole heck of a lot, but landscape buffers right here, maybe.
You gotta grab the car here.
Oh, that was part of that, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, we would look at a buffer. As
That's 50, that's
Just to make sure that, you know, parking lot's not going into somebody's
Sure.
backyard.
You know, you're buying into that, these are the
Yeah,
people
that
that
whole
will
block.
This is.
I figured if there was gonna be a phase 2, that would be proper.
It's just a skill.
Like you said, sidewalks, like Carolina, so we'll talk about
Yeah.
that.
There's something.
And once we have footprints.
In your garage here.
And something else just dropped into me, we're talking about signage, Bob talked about signage, is there gonna be about potential with the traffic study and initiative about having no left-hand turn going on at certain hours? Potentially, is that even a thought process?
That would ultimately be, access would be dictated by state DOT.
Right, yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there.
I mean, at this point, the analysis has been completed, assuming full access.
Okay.
Anything else? Planning board, zoning board, ARB?
The commercial development will be developed at the same time as the residential, or are those gonna be later?
It's up in the air, but
Because I thought at one point, like, these were coming later, but that was a while ago, so.
For the purposes of the traffic study, everything is assumed.
Okay.
Given that we didn't have, you know, a strict set of commercial, we assumed a 7,500 square feet of restaurant and 5,000 square feet of retail in the study.
And typically what happens is, if they basically get a environmental impact determination on what they've studied. So if they come back and all of a sudden it's double that, that's gonna trigger an additional review. I might imagine if there's nothing on that, can we approve a PDD unless it's really strict in language on what's there? And then if that deviates, you gotta come back.
Yeah, but yeah,
Yeah.
I would think. I mean, that would be the goal, I would think.
So that's free for all.
That would be my goal. I don't like free-for-alls. Okay, if there's anything further, I'd like to ask for a motion to close the meeting.
Sure.
Okay.
Seconded.
Andrew, Johanna, thank you.
thank you.
Approved, closed. Thank you.